Hi everyone, I'm Abigail. This is Sippy, and welcome to another Two Kids Interview. Today we are joined by anti-bias, anti-racist, and author Liz Kleinrock.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here with you.
First, Happy New Year, and what are your Rosh Hashanah plans this week?
Lashana Tova. It's great to be here. Let's see. On Wednesday evening, I'm going to go to services with my family. My synagogue here in DC does like a big outdoor gathering. There's like a giant tent outside. People who are not Jewish are welcome to attend also. And then on Thursday, I will go to synagogue again with my family. And then we will have, I think, like brunch afterwards at my parents' house. What about you?
Nice. Well, my mom's a cantor and her dad's the rabbi, so we're kind of doing something similar.
That's awesome. Are you going to have some apples and honey?
Yeah, but maybe not the honey part. Love honey. I don't really like it.
Well, at least the apples. I'm here for that.
For what Jewish looks like. I'm sure there are so many great people you considered putting in, but you had to leave out. How did you decide, and who was the hardest person you left out?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. So, in What Jewish Looks Like, my co author Caroline and I chose 36 Jewish people. The number 36 in Judaism is significant because 18 is high, which means life. So, it's considered a lucky number. So, 18 times 2 is 36. So, the idea for the book really came about because growing up, I always heard from a lot of people, both Jewish and not Jewish, that, oh, you don't look Jewish when they found out that I was because I'm Korean. And so we wanted to make sure that kids who are reading this book would be able to see some part of themselves reflected in the people that we chose. So it was really important for us to have a lot of balance when it came to representation and thinking about the people in the book and how they might identify in terms of their race or ethnicity or gender, and lots of different parts of who they are. As well as Jewish people who lived in lots of different countries around the world, too. But yeah, 36 might seem like a lot, but we had a lot more people who we wish we could have chosen from. I know that for my co author, somebody she really wished could have been in the book was Maya Rudolph, who is a wonderful comedian and actress. She's Black and Jewish. And for me, goodness, I kind of wish that I've been able to put Eli Roth in the book. He is a Jewish filmmaker also, but he does a lot of like horror and scary movies. And I really like scary movies. But unfortunately, there just wasn't space. But at the very end, we do have a very long list of other Jewish people that we think folks should be able to research and learn about.
I was really excited that Diggs was made the book as he's one of my favorite entertainers.
He's really amazing. Have you seen the video Puppy for Hanukkah?
Of course.
It's so good. It's so good.
On our channel, we interviewed authors Susan Tan and Vera Haranadani. Both of them are people of color and Jewish, and now they've each written books with characters who are people of color and Jewish. How does it make you feel that there are now characters like that in books?
And it makes me feel really happy. I always want to try to write books that I wish I had as a kid. And I do think that books like the ones that you just mentioned are going to do a lot to help kids and help adults really broaden their understanding of who Jewish people are and Jewish experiences, and remind people that not all Jewish people look the same or share Ashkenazi ancestry. So, Jewish people who migrated through parts of Russia and Eastern Europe. That Jewish people can be multiracial and multi-ethnic, and there are lots of different ways of identifying as Jewish and a lot of different ways to live out being Jewish. So I am really happy that those books exist in the world. And to be completely honest, I'm also like a little bit jealous that kids now will be able to have access to books like that because I didn't have access to books like that when I was younger.
You teach anti-racism on our channel. We have spoke with authors of color and LGBTQ authors about allyship. My parents always teach me that if I see And he's saying, I can't be a bystander. I have to be an upstander.
I love that. That's a really important lesson to learn.
What is your message to people if you see or hear someone else being anti someone else?
Sometimes it can be really hard. I actually think that it's often easier to say something if somebody else says or does something that's harmful to another person. It's sometimes easier if you don't actually know the person very well, because it feels like you don't really have as much to risk or to lose. But let's say that it's maybe one of your best friends who says something like that. So now you also might have this worry of, are we still going to be friends? How are they going to take it if I tell them, hey, you said or did something that didn't really feel good to me or to other people? Um, I have always found that being able to talk about how somebody's actions or words make you feel is a really great place to start, because it reminds them of the relationship and the connection that the two of you have together. And that often, if you come in from a place of wanting to like yell at somebody or embarrass somebody, it's really hard for people to learn when they're coming from a place of feeling embarrassed or ashamed. So letting them know, I really care about you. I care about our friendship or our relationship. And because of that, there's something that we need to talk about, because I have a feeling that you probably didn't mean to hurt anybody's feelings, but the way that what you said or did came off didn't really land in a way that felt very good. So if you can always seek to try to teach somebody something instead of just judging them or telling them that they're a bad person, I think that's always going to go a much longer way.
That makes sense. Books are being challenged and banned way too much right now. We
It's
are pretty sure you are against bans. Do you have a message on why they are?
Yeah, I am definitely very against book banning. Even books that I might not agree with, I still think that people should be able to make their own decisions or whether or not they want to read them. And I think it's one thing for a person or a parent or a teacher to say, I actually don't want like my child to read a particular book, but that doesn't mean that I should then say no one should be able to read this book. And I think that can be really dangerous, because we have to think about who's making those decisions. And maybe there might be a book out there that you disagree with, and you might say, I don't think anyone should read this. But if somebody who has a really different opinion than you does or says the exact same thing, it's probably not going to feel very good. And being exposed to lots of different ideas and beliefs and ways of thinking can teach us really valuable lessons about what we believe and what we want to do, and also the types of behavior and thinking that we also want to avoid as well. Um, I think being able to have free access to lots of different types of information help people become like critical thinkers. That way they can really think for themselves and form their own ideas. Because in the type of teaching I do, I always say that I think it's really important to teach kids how to think instead of what to think. I don't want to be in a classroom and telling my students, I'm going to give you my opinion, and this is the one right way to behave or to think, or anything like that. I want them to be able to come to their own conclusions. And I think the more access that we have to information, hopefully people are able to make, positive decisions for themselves.
How excited were you the first time you saw the illustrations of what Jewish looks like?
I was so excited. I think I got pretty emotional and might have like teared up a little bit. Our illustrator for the book, their name is Iris, and they did such an amazing job. Iris actually has another book that they wrote and published a couple of years ago called Seeing Gender. And right when Caroline and I saw this book that Iris wrote and illustrated, we knew that they were the absolute right fit to illustrate this book, because they did such a good job taking ideas that can sometimes be a little abstract and hard for people to understand, but were able to create these drawings and illustrations that communicated those ideas so beautifully. And in What Jewish Looks Like, I think they did a really incredible job of illustrating these portraits and these maps and these different concepts about what it means to be Jewish in a way that's so bright and so colorful and so inviting, where yes, these portraits are illustrations, but they still very much look like the people that they're supposed to look like.
What writer has had the most influence on you?
Mm, That's such a good question because there's so many out there. um, One person who comes to mind is Ellen O. She has written books like Finding Junie Kim and Spirit Hunters, and she's also Korean American. And so I look up to her for a lot of different reasons. She also lives pretty close to me, and we've been able to meet up with each other. We've become friendly with each other. And I really appreciate her work because she understands the importance of having really meaningful representation in books. She does a lot of writing about Korean American kids and families. She also likes scary things, just like I do, and that makes me really happy. And because she has also been involved in publishing and writing for such a long time, she's always offered a lot of feedback and guidance for me when I haven't really known what to do. If it's how to get a book published or asking her to read part of a story I'm working on and asking for her opinion or ideas. But I think most importantly, she is one of the founders of the organization We Need Diverse Books. And they are all about making sure that kids all over this country have access to books that feature a lot of different kinds of people from different backgrounds, and making sure that if kids want to read those stories, that they'll be able to. So I admire her a lot as an author, and I also admire her a lot for her activism.
What's the number one piece of advice you have for young writers?
Number one piece of advice I have for young writers is to keep at it. Like if writing is something that you want to do, you have to be what I would say, like really hungry for it. Because I think a lot of people like writing for fun, but if you want to write books, it requires a lot of practice. And so when I teach writing or when I go and visit schools as an author, I always tell kids that writing a book is about 25% actually writing the book, but it's about 75% editing and revising. And I hated editing and revising my writing. And I still struggle with it a little bit. But when I was younger, and even when I just started writing books, like as an adult, sometimes I would write a draft and think, this is really good. I think I'm finished. And I was so incredibly wrong. And sometimes it's really fun to be able to look back at the first draft of a book and then what it looks like at the very end. And a lot of the time, it looks really, really different. So I think also for young writers, being open to letting other people read what you're working on, being really open-minded to their feedback and their ideas, instead of just saying, I did this one draft and therefore I'm done and it's perfect. There are always ways that we can go back and revise and try to improve and get other people's feedback because they have really different perspectives and they might be able to point something out to you that you hadn't thought of before.
Makes sense.
Do you two like writing? Do you do a lot of writing on your own?
Yeah, I like making comics.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you like to draw too?
Yeah. What are you writing right now?
Oof. So I'm working on a couple of things right now. For kids, there is a picture book about these women. They're called Hanyo, and they are female divers, and they live on an island called Jeju-do, which is off the coast of South Korea. And these women have been diving for generations, and they don't use any scuba diving equipment. They swim in really, really cold waters, and they fish, and they harvest abalone and conch. And it's a profession that has only been done by women. And these skills and these traditions have been passed down from women and their families, but the population is getting a lot older. And so there aren't many of these women becoming these hanyo, these divers anymore. So that's one book. I've also been working on a kid's book about antisemitism, which is like anti-Jewish hatred. Because I found that there are a lot of books out there about racism, about how to be like kind and inclusive to like queer people. But anti-Semitism is a lot trickier because it can look like a lot of different things. And I think a lot of books for kids that mention anti-Semitism tend to focus just on the Holocaust. And so for young readers and adults too, to be able to understand that anti-Semitism is something that's still happening today a lot, and being able to understand what it looks like and what we can do to fight it, I think is a resource that we really, really need. And then the last thing that I can share is that I've also been working on a historical fiction middle grade novel focused on, it's also Jewish themed. There was a woman named Frederica Mandelbaum, who was a Jewish German woman who immigrated to New York in around 1850. And she was this like really, really big woman. She was like 6 feet tall. Like everyone could see her like walking down the street. And she was in charge of like the black market. So like when things were stolen, like she would resell them, which I know sounds like not a great, like to be a thief is like not a great thing. But she was also really complex. She really believed in mentoring young women, wanting to make sure that women had like the skills and resources to take care of themselves instead of just being reliant on their husbands at the time. She was very community minded. She was a huge philanthropist and like gave back to her community a lot. And she was just a really fascinating person. And so in this book, it follows a young girl who's kind of taken under the wing of this woman after she loses her family, and about her kind of grappling with what is right and what is wrong, set in the Lower East Side of New York in like the 1870s, 1880s. And that's been really fun to research.
That makes a lot of sense. I would definitely read that.
I'm excited. It's fun to write.
Me too. We love middle grade historical novels. We are also glad you are writing anti the anti-Semitism book. Does it have a working title?
At the moment, it doesn't. I think the title that the document is called right now is called The World's Oldest Hatred. I have a feeling that's probably going to change a bit. I wrote it at first as what's called like a concept based book. So sometimes there are concept based books and then there are like narrative books. And so a narrative book is going to have like a beginning, a middle, and end. It's going to have characters and a story arc. But a concept based book might speak directly to the reader instead. And so you're not going to have characters. It's just going to be talking about ideas. And so the first draft I wrote is concept based. So it's speaking directly to the readers about what anti-Semitism is and what it looks like and where it stems from and why it's so complicated. But now I need to go back and rewrite it as a story instead. And so I've been working on how to change the format of that to, just make it look a little different.
What age is the book for? I think you said it was middle schoolers. I'm not sure.
The book about anti-Semitism would probably be for kids around your age. I would really like kids in elementary school to begin to have that understanding, because I think sometimes kids don't learn about that until in middle school or even high school, or maybe not even in school at all, and they might not know anything about it. But I think in order to be able to fight problems, to solve problems, we have to be able to name what the problems are. We have to be able to identify the problems in the first place. And I would hope that a book like that would be able to at least begin that conversation of readers being able to see, oh, I didn't actually know that this is a type of anti-Semitism, or that anti-Semitism can look like this or that. And now that I know that, I want to make sure that I don't do those things. And I also want to make sure that other people don't do those things.
I wish I knew a bit more about anti-Semitism and all that stuff, because I know there's a lot of different stuff other than the Holocaust, and I've tried to find a lot more. But a lot of those books, you find them in the kids section, and they get really scary, which is
Mhm.
the part where I conclude my reading and I close the book. So
Yeah, we need to be able to talk about it in a way that doesn't scare people, that invites them to be curious and to want to learn more and understand more. And I think anti-Semitism can be really tricky to explain to kids and to adults, because it doesn't look like some of the other forms of discrimination that are talked about more often. Like, for example, when we talk about racism in the United States, especially when we're talking about anti-Black racism or anti-Asian racism, so much of it is based on how people present, just what they look like on the outside. But when you're a Jewish person, you can look like how you look, you can look like how I look, you can be of lots of different identities too. And this whole idea of race too is really different depending on when you lived and where you lived. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that while if you're Jewish, that means that can be your ethnicity, it could be your religion, but being Jewish is actually not a race. But in the past, people have treated it like a race. And so when we look at history and some of the laws that were created, especially in places like Spain in the 1400s, it was one of like the first examples of like legislation or like legal like laws that specifically discriminated against a particular group of people, and that was the Jewish community. And so a lot of people don't understand these things. And again, if we're going to try to make sure it doesn't happen anymore, we have to understand what the problem is.
I'm reading a middle grade book now that has a character facing anti-Semitism. Me too.
And I think that we also need more modern examples. And that way, I think maybe kids like yourselves might be able to connect a little bit more to those stories and the lessons from them.
The book that I'm reading comes out next year. Finally, it's time for Turbo 10. 10 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
Number 1. What is your favorite phrase to use?
Phrase to use. Oh, like in writing?
Anything.
In general? Oh, man. I think probably one of the phrases I use the most is tell me more about that. That's one I use a lot as a teacher.
Number 2. What is one subject you love to learn more about?
One subject, I would like to really learn more about different languages. Languages have always been a little hard for me, so I'd like to get better there.
Number 3. What is your go-to snack food?
I really like frozen grapes.
Number 4. What would one of your favorite books growing up?
One of my favorite books is The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster.
I really like that one.
Yeah.
Number 5. If you could teleport somewhere right now, where would you go?
Oh, right now, a beach somewhere. It's like kind of cold and gray outside, so I would like a beach very much.
Number 6. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Teleportation, so that way I could travel the world and not have to pay for plane tickets.
Number 7. What was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
My favorite cartoon as a kid, I liked Nickelodeon a lot. I think Hey Arnold was probably one of my favorites.
Number 8. What is your favorite rainy day activity?
Drinking tea, reading books inside, and hanging out with my cat.
Number 9. If you could have any 3 dinner guests, who would they be?
3 dinner guests. People who are alive or people who have deceased?
No.
No rules. Oh, okay. Michelle Obama, for one. I think she's amazing. Yuri Kochiyama, who was a really incredible Asian American activist. Who else? That's really hard.
It can also be fictional characters.
Oh man, a fictional character too.
Mhm.
This is so hard. Um, Julia Child. I really loved her cooking program. I think she was just a really interesting person too. It'd be a strange assortment of people, but I think that would be my 3.
Number 10. What is the best piece of advice you were ever given?
Um, I think my dad would always tell me to not sweat the small stuff and to remember that in like the scheme of life, most things end up being the small stuff. And sometimes when things can feel really stressful or really hard, knowing that so much of this is just temporary and that you can do really hard things and you're going to be okay.
You were awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Of course. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Shana Happy New Year.